life, we can all be overwhelmed, we can all be stressed, we can all be overworked, we can all have problems, and we can all fall asleep. Some of us can fall asleep a lot easier than others. Some can jump into a car for a car journey and they're off to the land of Nod. Someone can jump on a bus and a train and fall asleep quite happily. Other people stay wide awake. There are many reasons why people might take a nap during the day or at a special event. We don't actually know what is going on in other people's lives. However, narcissistic individuals use this to their advantage, as they will happily pretend to be asleep, just like they will pretend to have an illness if it gets them out of something, and they will usually choose things like headaches and bad bags that you can't particularly see or call them out on. You just notice when it suits them, they haven't got one, and when it suits them, they have. A narcissistic individual will happily pretend to be asleep if they want to listen into the conversation. If they want to know something, they will pretend to be asleep. So never discuss anything around somebody who is asleep if you don't want them to know that information, just in case they're not actually asleep. Now, I don't mean don't want them to know information that is information that they're entitled to know. I mean information that's none of their business. A narcissistic individual will pretend to be asleep just to simply avoid having a conversation with you, to avoid discussing something of importance with you. You can get up in the morning and say, hey, we need to talk about, let's just get ready and get to it. We'll talk about it later on. We'll get to it later on. And then when you get home ready to discuss it, you'll walk in and they're fast asleep, avoiding the conversation. And then when they wake up, you've got to wait for them to wake up and have some food. And as you feel compassionate towards them and care about them, you're going to give them all the time in the day to get themselves in the right headspace. And then when you go to communicate it, oh, I'm tired, I'm off to bed. So you can never actually have that communication with them that they don't want to have with you. They're not interested. They're only interested in themselves. They look to pretend to be asleep to avoid doing things, to get out of doing things. Arrange a nice family day out and suddenly they just can't get themselves out of bed. They're tired. And it's not depression, because when they want to be up, they're up quite happily. It's avoidance. That they pretend to be depressed and you don't want to push it with them because you don't want to upset them and you don't want to hurt them, and they get away with their behaviour. They pretend to fall asleep so that they can manipulate and control the situation, because if they're asleep, you can't talk to them. You can't ask them something. You don't want to wake them up. You don't want to disturb them because they're asleep. You don't want to be that person that goes disturbing and interrupting other people's sleep. So they get to control the narrative. They can pretend to be asleep to gain the attention and the admiration. Now, a birth of a child is a classic example of this, because it can be very, very tiring. So potentially, if you're up in the middle of the night and you go into labour and you wake your other half up, they might be tired. They might nod off. They might fall asleep. They can. They're not in labour. And you can think, oh, well, they're just tired. Let them catch up. When the baby's born, they can deal with the baby and I can get some rest. With a narcissistic individual, because the attention isn't on them, because it's about you, and even though it's their child, because it's about you and the child and not them, they don't like it. So they will pretend to fall asleep, to get people getting them pillows and getting them things and helping them out. So a narcissistic individual will happily pretend to be asleep if the attention's not on them. You can have a big family occasion going off, a big special event, and you can decide to invite the narcissistic individual so that you haven't got any regrets. It is selfish, but it's so you haven't got any regrets in your life. You know what they're like, but I'll invite them anyway because it's a bit mean to leave them out, and I don't want to be that mean person. So you invite them anyway, and they come round and they fall asleep and ignore everyone. And then when it's time to leave, they're happy and jovial again because they didn't want to communicate with people. They didn't want to be there, but they had that fear of missing out. So they wanted to turn up, but they can just pretend to be asleep and listen in to everyone's conversations while not having to join in. They can pretend to be asleep to feign that helplessness. They're just tired and overworked, and they might have promised to cook tea, they might have promised to clean up, yet they come home and they just fall asleep because they're always the victim. They've always had the longest day, the hardest day, the worst day. You don't have it as bad as them, therefore you can take care of it. However, without directly stating it, they'll leave everything in a mess and pretend to be asleep, and you can walk in and with your compassion you can see this and think, oh, I'll go and help them out. So I'll go and do this, that and the other for them to make life easier for them. You can't wake them up because you feel bad for waking them up. And if you do wake them up because you know that they're actually not asleep and they're just pretending to be asleep to get out of it, they turn into the victim of how you don't care about them, how you're not there for them. So you can't win with them. You cannot win, because if you leave them to it and don't do it, they claim you don't care. If you leave them to it and do it, then you're doing everything for them. If you try and wake them up and get them going, they accuse you of not caring about them. You're in a no-win situation when you're dealing with a narcissistic individual. They will happily pretend to be asleep to avoid responsibility. So they will promise to take little Johnny or little Jenny to one of their activities, and then they will suddenly pretend to be asleep. So if you wake them up, they're going to be in a bad mood and they're going to stomp out the door with the child shouting and in a bad mood, and you don't want to put your child through that. So it's easier to take them yourself, or the child might miss out because you might have other plans. You're constantly in that juggling act of trying to keep everybody happy because the narcissistic individual continues to let you down. And pretending to be asleep is an easy way for a narcissist to do this, because we all know we can have had that long day. We all know we can just simply not feel like it. We all know we can nod off now and again. So you don't see them for the games that they are playing. When it comes to a narcissistic individual, it's usually a repeat pattern of behaviour. So you'll notice if you've arranged a nice family day out, these are the times where they're suddenly going to want to lie in and make everybody late and put everyone else on edge. And then when they're ready, ask what's wrong with everyone else, even though they didn't do anything to help out. They're looking to play the victim in this scenario and to gain as much attention as they possibly can out of it. If anyone has any thoughts on this video, please do add those into the comments with people reading through. Thank you very much to all the returning subscribers and your continued support with the channel. It's greatly appreciated. If you are new to the channel, I'm Elizabeth Shaw. This channel is all about narcissistic behaviour to give you more understanding of the people you might be dealing with within your life, how to handle yourself around those people if you cannot go no contact, and different methods to find what works for you to help you understand and overcome narcissistic and emotional abuse. If you do find the information helpful on the channel, please do subscribe. If you are looking for further help and support in understanding and overcoming narcissistic and emotional abuse, I do have several online guides available, and those teachable links are in the video description. If you're looking for someone to speak to, I have partnered with BetterHelp, and their sponsored link is also in the video description. I do also have several books out on Amazon: 15 Rules to Deal with Narcissistic Individuals If You Cannot Go No Contact, a Narcissists Handbook, which is the ultimate guide to understanding and overcoming narcissistic and emotional abuse, and how to create boundaries around those who have no respect for your boundaries. Go out there and create the day that you deserve, because you do deserve to have an amazing day. Bye.